We will support democracy from Asia to Africa, from the Americas to the Middle East, because our interests and our conscience compel us to act on behalf of those who long for freedom. And we must be a source of hope to the poor, the sick, the marginalized, the victims of prejudice, not out of mere charity, but because peace in our time requires the constant advance of those principles that our common creed describes: tolerance and opportunity.
The government in Ethiopia has become increasingly belligerent and bolder with its divisive ethnic system politics and policies. To date, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, continues to carry out intimidation, torture, abduction, imprisonment, massacres, ethnic cleansing, assassinations, and genocide. The following documentary will analyze the factors that are leading Ethiopia toward disintegration. It will examine the political, economic, and social aspects within Ethiopia and how they are controlled by a tyrannical government that is based on a single ethnic group. The government in Ethiopia has embraced a system that combines ethnocracy and plutocracy totalitarianism. Of that ethnic group, the rich are the apex of the system, where they continue to stretch and exploit Ethiopians to the benefit of themselves and their ethnic group. The ethnocratic aspect of the regime is seen in several sectors and institutions that are controlled and dominated by a single ethnic group, the Tigray ethnic group, that has continued to subjugate and oppress Ethiopians. This dominance by a single ethnic group is not subtle, but rather an open secret Ethiopians have known for the past 20+ years. The plutocratic aspect of the regime is that many of those in power have built wealth by controlling and exploiting the sources of money that enter and leave the country. Whether those sources are federal foreign aid or the investments of private individuals, officials of the regime coerce, intimidate, and threaten investors with arrest if they do not get shares or derive some profit. For a number of years, Ethiopia has been consistently ranked among failed states. According to organizations such as Fund for Peace, Ethiopia has been included in the critical or warning categories of the fund's Fragile States Index for the past several years. This is corroborated by the results of the long-term analysis of the U.S. National Intelligence Council, which placed Ethiopia among the 15 states that will become virtual failed states. Neighboring Somalia is the best example of a failed state in which everything has disintegrated because of years of inter-clan animosity and conflicts. The United States must take into consideration the obvious signs and immediately take action against the Tigray government, or else usher in the inevitable disintegration of the country with its support, which in turn will present opportunities for terrorist groups to seize control. With the TPLF government in power, Ethiopia is heading toward a full-fledged terrorist state, and should the United States choose to support the government, it would run the risk of undermining its own interests. Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and Somalia can be cited as states in which terrorists have taken advantage of the disintegration by seizing the opportunity to launch and create hubs, and like these countries, Ethiopia could become a potential hub for terrorists when it disintegrates. If this is not immediately addressed, there's a high probability that Ethiopia might disintegrate. Ethiopia must democratize immediately, or it will become a failed state, much like Somalia, Syria, and Iraq. And it'll be 10 times as chaotic because there are many different ethnic groups with different religions and political ideologies. In other words, unlike Syria and Iraq, where 2 or 3 ideologies are in competition, in the case of Ethiopia, it would mean at least a minimum of 10 ideologies with hundreds of armed groups fighting for their interests. To give a deeper perspective, the major points of conflict that can lead to disintegration will be presented. In addition, what Western countries, particularly the United States, can do to prevent Ethiopia from becoming a failed state will be discussed. Ethiopia has been in the top 10 recipients of U.S. aid for decades. According to the DAC, Ethiopia has been the 5th largest recipient of DAC donor humanitarian aid over the last 10 years, accounting for $19 billion or 23.5% of the total allocated to specific countries. According to Index Mundi, a website that collects data and statistics from multiple sources, in the past 20 years, the Tigray government has received an estimated $40 billion plus in assistance. In 2008 alone, Ethiopia received $829 million in official development assistance, and in 2012, Ethiopia was the recipient of $707 million. Many of the funds given in the form of aid end up in two places. One is the Endowment Fund for the Rehabilitation of Tigray, or EFFORT. This corporation is the biggest corporation in terms of revenue and assets within Ethiopia. The other place is in offshore accounts kept in private banks in the names of children of TPLF politicians. In addition to ceasing funding, there must also be an investigation of EFFORT. This can be confirmed by the Global Financial Integrity Report, which has stated that Ethiopia lost $11.7 billion in illicit financial outflows between 2000 and 2009. The so-called aid is funding genocide, torture, imprisonments, and ethnic cleansing. In 2013, the World Bank had attempted to hold an investigation on why its funding program, affecting thousands of people, relocated to make way for agriculture investors. There must be an investigation of assets owned by TPLF businesses within Western and Eastern Asian countries. Many of these assets are often placed in the names of their children so that they're not traceable to them. Throughout its 23 years in power, the Tigray regime has carried out several ethnic cleansings and genocides and continues to do so. It has carried out genocide on the Amara, Gambela, and Ogaden people, and in none of the genocides has the government acknowledged any wrongdoing. Since the early 1990s to the present, the Amaras have been cleansed from Goraferda, Shoa, Jijiga, Wolkite, Humera, Gambela, and many other areas. Hundreds of thousands of Amaras have been deliberately cleansed from various parts of the country under the orders of the Tigray government. As recently as September 2014, Amaras were still being cleansed from the south. The man responsible for the ethnic cleansing, particularly in the south, is Shekarau Shagute, who was at one point the governor of the southern regions, and through his own statements he has confirmed that the Amaras were subject to ethnic cleansing. The government has not been held accountable, nor has it acknowledged the killings. The Amara genocide has been largely ignored and uninvestigated. According to the Ethiopian census of 2007, the Amara population was 2.7 million people short of the projected numbers. While other ethnic groups were within, and some even over the projected growth, the Amara population did not show any growth at all. The confounding results were reported and ratified in Parliament. After several investigations, no one could understand why 2.7 million people were missing. In 2003, the Tigray government committed genocide against the Anuak, killing 400 people and scattering thousands of people from their villages. The attacks were carried out among more than a dozen villages, where women and children were victims of the attack.
These are pictures of people from Gambela, Ethiopia. It was in response to what human rights organizations say was the government-led slaughter of hundreds of people from the Anuak tribe in 2003. Today, there are still thousands of people who fled Gambela for Sudan living in refugee sites. Many of the children are orphans. Some who surviving Anuak say saw their parents killed before their eyes.
The government had no reason to kill them because they never did anything. And the government just came in and killed men and boys and raped women and girls and That's what happened in
I'm sorry.
8 soldiers surrounded my husband, repeatedly hitting him with their guns. Then Highlander militia started slashing him on his head, neck, and face.
We're forced to collect bodies of dead Anuak in front of Gambela Secondary School. We pick up bodies of 4 or 5 dead Anuak men.
The military commander who was responsible for the genocide was Major Sigaya Biyena, and Barnabas Gebreab, the Ethiopian federal minister who was responsible for Gambela state, stated that all reports of an Anuak genocide were fabrications and that it was a group of armed Anuak men who carried out the genocide. In 2007, the Tigray government once again carried out genocide, but this time against the Ogaden people in the towns of Fik, Kore, Gode, Wardahir, and Dahagabur. The government went from village to village, torturing, raping, and killing women and children.
Look at my hand. These are bullet shots by the Ethiopian military. While I did not commit any crimes to deserve these, I was an innocent civilian. I have more bullet wounds on other parts of my body. This on my back is another wound. I was an innocent civilian, a camel herder.
It was about 2 p.m. when they shot me in the head, but fortunately the bullet hit me through the side. Look at this long scar on my cheek. It is a gunshot wound, now healed. They left me as a dead body. The atrocities I suffered were uncountable. It is not something I can say consisted of such and such things. There was nothing they could do to us that they spared. I suffered the ultimate suffering. We were in a small town named Gerdumi in Dagabur province on February 15, 2009. When the army arrived, they started firing upon us indiscriminately and without asking any questions. It's the bullet that has done this to me. My teeth, mouth, all of this. It came in right here, went through my mouth and out here. They left me for dead. The people who were there were either killed, wounded, arrested, or fled for their lives. The dire situation that people are in is not something that can be described in words. Only those experienced it know. Here are some more stories of torture of Ogaden women in Ethiopia by Malez Zenawi's troops.
They detained and divided us into different detention locations. Soldiers who attacked us were the federal police who came from Addis Ababa. The interrogators were also from Addis Ababa. I was in the central prison in Chigchiga with many other women. We had suffered continuous torture, rape, and strangulation. Soldiers put blankets on prisoners' heads with hot pepper chili smoke and rubbed it into their eyes. In some situations, they forced prisoners to drink salt water. They tied our legs with large wooden bars with heads down like bats. They used to throw us in water pools and suffocate us with plastic bags. They tortured men in shocking and inhumane methods.
The regime's reason for massacring the people was in the interest of oil in the Abole region. The Tigray government had made deals with a Chinese petroleum company to exploit the area for oil, and so it was used as a rebel attack on the area as a pretense to carry out its genocide. Recently, an opposition media, Ethiopian Satellite Television, or ESAT, released a leaked video of a massacre of the Ogaden. In the video, several dead bodies are seen.